So as we heard, both from Rabbi Roller and from our readers, the Torah reading is quite a beautiful Torah reading, beginning with the stirring words, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall be holy because I, the Lord, or the eternal your God, am holy. So that sounds probably difficult. How can we be holy like God is holy? It sets up a very hierarchical model. God at the top, we're at the bottom. God is holy, God is special in some way. So we have to figure out what can we do to be holy like God. And the rabbis realized that this was a very great challenge. After all, God is beyond any words. According to the Talmud, God is, I'm squeaking today. According to the Talmud, God is a consuming fire, or like a consuming fire, kiviyachol, and therefore, how can we, and if we even want to be, like a consuming fire? We don't really want that, do we? So, the rabbis say, well, just as God is holy, we are holy, meaning that we need to copy God. Imitatio Deo, a very important concept in religious studies and religious thought, that we imitate God. And it starts here in Kedoshim. Just as God is holy, we copy God in our actions and therefore are holy. As Rabbi Roller talked about in his introduction to the Torah reading, there are lots of rituals here that we find that give us these kind of instructions. But the rabbis give us a little bit of a cheat sheet. They make it simple. Just as God is forgiving, you should be forgiving. Just as God is gracious, you should be gracious, and onward. Taking the Shloshis Rei Midot, taking the 13 attributes, and saying this is what emphasizes, this is how we can copy God. And they also look at the Torah and say the Torah is a guide for us as we copy God. Just as God clothes the naked, so too we should clothe the naked. Thinking about others and the disadvantages of our world, we should ensure, just as God ensures, that people have what they need. And maybe it's through us that this happens by God. Just as God visits the sick, so too we should visit the sick. That's an obligation that's on all of us, to think about those who are sick, to think about those who need our support, and be there for them, visiting and giving them strength. Just as God comforts the mourners, so too we should comfort mourners. A really, really, really important mitzvah. And just as God buries the dead, we too should bury the dead. Now there is going to be a quiz during the Kiddush about where those things come from in the Torah. But we'll leave the quiz for now. It's a surprise quiz, so these give us a challenge, and if you think about those mitzvot, and here's some hints, one is at the beginning of the Torah and one's at the end, essentially what it's saying is, this book, the Torah, is the guide to tell us how we can be holy, just as God is holy. Now, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of holiness, and holiness is quite a challenge, but in one sense, the Jewish idea of holiness is very different from other traditions. In Eastern religions, you often will go off to a mountain to find holiness. There are special mountains in Japan where there are many, many Buddhist temples especially, or Shinto temples, and it's almost a pilgrimage to get there. And there you might find a living Buddha, or you might find a Shinto priest who's especially holy, and you go to them for advice. Or you go in India to find a guru on a mountain to get advice. To leave the community is what makes them holy. And even in Western religions, there was a tradition in Christianity for the most holy of monks to go off to the desert, and that's where they were holy. And even in later times, when people weren't going off so far to the desert, there was an idea that real holiness was found in the monasteries, while the regular clergy rather the secular clergy, if you think about those words, the secular clergy were those who were out in the field in churches around the community. But in Judaism, we look at it just the opposite. You don't need to go across the sea to find holiness. You don't need to go to heavens to find holiness. Holiness is in our hearts and our mouths that we can do it. It's with us that we need to be doing it. So holiness is what we do within the community. Holiness is how we transform the community. Holiness is found right here and right now. So that's a really, really important idea about holiness, and it sets up the entire Parsha. But then the Parsha thinks about and has a whole list of actions, some of them echoing the Ten Commandments, some of them ritual, some of them Bein Adam L'Chavaro, ethical, but they're all there talking about holiness. And it's interesting, I saw a Hasidic text this week that the rabbis studied that actually turns that hierarchical model I talked about at the beginning right on its head. Because what the Degel Machaneh Ephraim suggests is that God becomes holy because of our actions of holiness on earth. That we make God holy or holier by our actions. And that really is so true. If we think about it, God is beyond any kind of description, and often it doesn't seem that God is present. But when we act, in a sense, aping God and make the world holy, then we're making and revealing God's presence in the world, and we're really making God holier, both in this world and beyond. So that's our job. So in a sense, God is holy, not because we are holy, not because of God, but God is holy because of us. So it's a really profound idea about the actions that we're required to do, the transformations we're required to do. And of course, do you know what the key mitzvah is for making God holy and making this world holy? Shotness. Shotness. It's not mixing wool and linen. That's the key. Well, maybe it is, but in an interesting way. So we have this list, as Rabbi Roller mentioned, which is both a list of ethical mitzvot and mitzvot that are ritual. And it covers and encompasses the whole of Jewish life. And I think it's really important, and here I'm giving some answers to Rabbi Roller's question, but I think it really is very, very important that both the ritual aspects as well as the ethical aspects are present. Because that really is what it means to be Jewish. That we do ritual things that shape our lives in a way, but we also do ethical things that shape the world. And both are important. There was a very important Christian theologian by the name of Hans Kung. Anybody heard of him? He got in trouble with the Vatican because he played down the Trinity. So he got excommunicated. But he wrote a book about Judaism, and he said Judaism would be wonderful if it only had the ethical mitzvot and it got rid of all its particular rituals. Then he wrote a book about Christianity, and he said Christianity would be wonderful if it focused on the ethics and got rid of the Trinity. And he wrote a book on Islam and essentially said the same. He missed the point. The rituals and the particularities make us who we are. They shape who we are, and they give us our identity. The ethics, yes, they're hugely important, but both go together, and we wouldn't be Jewish if we only did one without the other. He missed the point about diversity, wanting everyone to be the same. But I think the rituals go beyond even that idea of giving us a cultural identity. The rituals help us and prepare us so that we can do the ethical. For me, that's the point of why we spent this morning doing a ritual, praying. Because prayer, yes, it's about God, yes, it's about thanking, but even more so, it's about making us think about who we are and the kind of world we live in. So I would say that if the rituals that we do don't lead to the ethical, then maybe we need to question the rituals. But when the rituals allow us to deepen our lives,